This is Kathy Greenler-Sexton, and welcome. And I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, Transitioning to Recurring Revenue with Software Licensing. I have today with me two very talented experts with deep experience on this topic from Thales. Thales is a leading global brand for software licensing, delivery, and protection. And the Thales platform, Sentinel, is used by over 10,000 customers in 30 industries located in over 100 countries around the world. The team at Thales, formerly Gemalto, has seen quite a number of transitions to software licensing, and it's this experience and learnings that they're going to be sharing with us today. I'd like to welcome David DeMillo, who's the Vice President of Solutions, Software, and Monetization at Thales. And Dave has 25 years of experience in the software license and entitlement management space, and has led the software licensing efforts for companies like PTC and a major segment of IBM. Dave has been with Thales for 9 years and is one of the leading minds in the software monetization space. Dave and his team work with Thales' major customers to help them define and measure the business aspect and impact of monetizing software within their companies. Welcome, Dave. I'd also like to welcome Julie Donnell. She's the Business Solution Advisors at Thales, and Julie has more than 20 years experience in the software industry with a passion for customer experience. Before coming to Thales a year ago, she led the software licensing and deployment program at Minitab, where her team developed a cloud licensing platform as well as utilized commercial licensing products. Her experience with end-to-end global software delivery allows Julie, as a business solution advisor, to help customers prepare for licensing projects and measuring financial impact. Welcome, Julie. So just a little bit about Subscription Insider. We are a media company focused on the business of subscriptions and the industry's leading source for subscription-focused news, how-to information, and training. Today's webinar is a great example of the type of programs we love to host, and I invite you to check us out at subscriptioninsider.com. Now today, I know we all like to multi-process, but I'd like to just recommend that you turn everything off that's operating in the background, including your email, iTunes, whatever is going to distract you. We have some really great data to present to you and would like you to get the most out of your learning today. So with that, I'd like to officially start our session today, Transitioning to Recurring Revenue with Software Licensing. David, I know you're going to get started and talk about market trends. We're also going to be talking about transitioning to recurring revenue and how to get started. Dave? Excellent. Thank you. And you can hear me okay now, right? I can. Excellent. Thanks. And welcome, everybody. Okay, let's, I get to move the slides. Yay. Hang on. Here we go. One of the things that we're going to be talking about is really the business driver behind switching to a recurring revenue model. And we see certain behaviors of our customers, but we were kind of curious, and you can answer, I believe, in the chat. And we're kind of curious where your company's motivations are, either in revenue creation, meaning you need to grow your business and you realize that recurring revenue is a way forward, or is it simply customer satisfaction, meaning you need to sell the way your customers want to buy, business insights, or operational efficiency? That's question number one, and then I think we're going to move right ahead to the next question. Go ahead, Kathy. Yeah, no, I'd like, if you can, just enter the question of where is your motivation and where are you? If you could enter that into the type, into the chat window, that would be fantastic. And I can see we have quite a few people entering. That's great. Terry and Sherry and Anthony. We've got some great, we have quite a few people on the revenue creation as well as operational efficiency. So there's quite a wide range of people in terms of their motivations for transitioning. That's great, everybody. Thank you for that input. Yeah, interestingly enough, when we talk to our customers,
where we're seeing our new business. Usually revenue generation and revenue creation is probably about 75% of the motivation that we see in the market from our direct customers. Okay, let's move on. I get this pop another question ahead. Let's go. Okay, and then when you think of how you want to, offer value to your customers, what exactly is it that you think they want, right? Do they want the flexible pricing? Do they want instant delivery, or smooth user experience, or usage and insight? So, which of these things do you think is most important to your customers? And again, if you could put your answer in the chat box, that would be tremendous.
Yeah, we're seeing some answers come in, so thank you, everybody. Flexible pricing is some of the early answers from things, as well as a smooth user experience.
Interestingly enough, I think kind of getting back to the previous slide, when we talk to our customers, it's usually the pricing model, right? Because all of us in our lives, we're experiencing more and more subscriptions in the B2C world, but even in B2B, our business is really hinging upon companies who want to offer much more flexible pricing. But we've also had wins in deals where they're simply looking to improve their customers' user experience. So those two answers definitely align with what we're seeing.
We probably should have had an all of the above. I see Joey answered B, C, and D. So I'm sure you see that as well, with multiple goals and objectives.
Okay.
For sure.
Nice. Yeah, and this, I think I've already spoken to this chart. So when we speak to customers, generally their motivations fall into these 3 areas. Oh, sorry, 4 areas. Hello, I can count. Revenue generation, like I said, is usually the top tier, and then customer satisfaction follows behind that, as well as operational efficiency. Business insights is interesting. We just hosted an event last week solely around business insights, and I think this is a market that will be expanding in all of our lives. Certainly it's a direction where we're going and trying to help our customers get more real data from their end customers so they can make better decisions. But it's really these 4 areas that that we're seeing transformational energy in. Okay, and the slide doesn't want to go. Let's go. Okay, when we talk about customer expectations, so this is your customers, right? Generally, and this is the rationale behind the second question, as I mentioned, generally what the motivation is from a consumer's perspective is they want to buy more flexibly, right? They want to buy only what they want to pay for only what they use. They want it now with a good experience, and of course, they'd like to see from an end user perspective, what their usage is, and then certainly from a vendor's perspective, from your perspective, you want to understand exactly what your customers are doing, if they're on a subscription, when they expire, how they're actually using the software, and so forth. So we'll get into some of that later. But these are the things that are really driving the market. And as we move forward here, kind of drilling down into why customers want subscriptions, this very much aligns with the answers to the second question that we asked, and it's really flexibility, right? Flexibility to adjust capacity, and a smaller upfront investment. As your companies are changing from a perpetual license offering to a subscription, we're going to talk about some of the organizational changes and so forth, but you need to think through how you're going to market in terms of your pricing, your service offerings, etc., because it all comes into play and it all matters. Right. We have this report through McKinsey, so if anyone wants to take a look at that, you can see the source down at the bottom. Okay, and really what we're talking about today is this chasm, right? As we've seen software companies or companies who are providing software, they don't have to be software companies in particular, move from perpetual licenses to more module-based software offerings. right? There tends to be a pretty big chasm between those traditional offerings and subscription. And I think that's why a lot of you are on the phone here today, to really try to get your arms around what this chasm is, what it looks like. As we go to usage-based, this is another interesting area because our customers, a lot of them do some sort of subscription when they come to us, but they're looking to operationalize that a whole lot better. And then we're seeing another pretty big gap between subscription and usage-based, which I think is going to be another frontier that we'll all embrace in the next couple of years. There's lots of different challenges from going to usage-based versus just simply going to subscription. I shouldn't say just simply going to subscription because it does involve some pretty large organizational changes. So looking at the market, again, this is a chart that came from IDC. They are an analyst firm that we use, and this is fresh off the press. In fact, I just got this chart from them last week. So if you look in the upper right, you'll see that the license CAGR, right, CAGR, that's actually going down. So what that means is perpetual license offerings tend to be on the decrease, whereas subscription offerings are on the rise. So that's, it probably doesn't surprise anybody, but to see the market data to support that should give you some confidence in the direction that things are heading. And as you take your business forward, you should be feeling comfortable that that's where the growth is. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving ahead here. As we kind of break down the core components of a successful transition, right? There's the strategic piece, which we'll talk to. There's the operational piece we'll talk to, and then there's the technology. So we, Thales, we are a technology company, right? And a lot of our customers will come to us for the technology, but we need to make sure that the strategy and the operational elements are in place, in order to maximize the effectiveness of the technology. So if you folks think about your companies, and then you can put the answer in the chat. Where do you think your company is in terms of transitioning to a recurring revenue model? Is it really on the strategic end? Is it in the execution end? Or are you actually refining your strategy? I'd be curious what the answers are here. And by the way, Kathy, I can't see the answers, so if there are items coming in, yeah, I apologize. I should have told you that.
Yeah, no worries. Anthony, the answer to you is yes. The slides will be available on the on-demand playback. So just a quick question that came in. I'm seeing a lot of A's right now, and please feel free to add some more. It's A, C, a lot of A's, some A and B's, a few B's, and then let's see, we're already recurring, but we're defining a new approach. So that's an interesting answer as well, defining an execution.
Nice.
Good. Nice. There we go. So moving along, I'm going to hit the next slide. Okay, so when we talk about some of the pitfalls under strategy, Julie, do you actually want to take the slide?
Since, sure, Dave.
This is your area for sure.
So, as companies start to make their transition, one thing that you want to think about is what kind of pitfalls might you encounter so that you can head those off before they occur. And so on the strategy side, a lot of times, things that you want to plan for in advance and think about are things that might cause customer churn, poor renewal rates, revenue leakage. And so when you look at your customer journey and how you're planning to implement your strategy and roll that out, you just want to be mindful that your method could lead you to some of these pitfalls. On the operations side, really thinking about your manual processes, how many people it's going to take to execute certain processes, and then just different areas of confusion for your operation. Those could also cause transition pitfalls. And then on the technology side, you really need to be thinking about your system customizations and trying to limit the amount of customizations that you have, as well as the number of resources that it takes to do various functions. So all of the areas that you see on this slide are really pitfalls that sometimes customers come to us with because they haven't really thought through those well enough in advance.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think the underlying message here is that your software business, and we've seen this within our customer base, and many of our customers are hardware companies that are embracing the value of software, and they see that becoming more and more important, and they realize that the prices of hardware are going down, and really the value is becoming a real bona fide software company. But when you start to look at the impact that software has on your organization, it's really all the way across your business, from sales, support, marketing, order management. It's not just a pricing issue anymore, right? It really affects everybody within your team. And then if you think about software in general, right? I'm curious, who actually owns software licensing at your company? Of course, we're in the software licensing business, so we see answers coming in from all different directions and so forth. But I'm really curious, within your company, who would you say actually is the driver and the owner?
I'm monitoring all your answers, and I do see for everybody some of the questions that are coming in as we go through the presentation. So keep sending them in, because we are going to be covering all those questions at the end.
Okay.
So
good.
We have a few product managements. We have product in engineering. We have
Interesting.
those are the bulk. We have licensing product manager, just a couple of those, and
Okay.
G is no one. So, and then we also have an I don't know. So that's
Interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. When we engage with companies, most of the time we're talking to companies whose answer is G. They don't really have anybody who owns it, simply because I'm going to go back a slide. Is that their software business is really at the center of their org chart. My slide don't want to go back. And so everybody has a play in software and how you license it and how do you go to market and so forth, but nobody wants to raise their hand and say, yes, this is how we do it, and here are our corporate policies and so forth. So we've actually put together, this is on a side note, what a software licensing program should kind of look like from your company, and who should run it, and the types of responsibilities they should have, et cetera. So if anybody wants to understand that, you get in touch with me directly, and we can chat about that a little bit further. Okay, so I'm going to move along. When we think about the transition to recurring revenue, I'm kind of curious, who is the executive that cares the most about this? Obviously, the CEO in any company is going to be the ultimate champion, but where is the push to transition to recurring revenue coming from? Is it a bottom up type of approach, or is it top down?
No, great answers, everybody. We've got product manager, product management, CEO. I've got a few different responses there.
Okay.
I'm trying to
That's
say a lot of A's, a lot of E's.
Okay.
A and E.
That makes sense.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we wrap up the webinar, we'll talk about how we approach the problem and so forth, and it's really focused on getting product management aligned to have those executive types of conversations, because you can't do it by yourself, right? It's a team effort and so forth. Okay. So let's keep moving forward here. And the slides are going slowly. I don't know, Kathy, if you can push the slide ahead. Okay,
Yeah.
and one
So,
more.
mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think where we're going to go next is just to talk with you about some strategies that you could maybe walk away from this webinar with to help you to start to make a transition toward recurring revenue. And the first thing that we want to mention is that nothing really replaces a good plan. And that's with anything in life, right? And so you really want to start by defining your vision, thinking through your strategy, and then assessing what type of an impact that particular strategy could have on your organization.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll add here is that oftentimes, and Julie, you've had a personal experience with this, we've had customers who come to us and again, we're a product company, right? We can actually help you implement some of these things, but they're really not ready because they haven't thought through an organizational impact. They haven't really thought through the plan, and they're kind of in that technology bucket that we saw in that circular image that we saw before.
For sure. No, that's a very good point, Dave, because a lot of times companies will come with their list of requirements of all the things that they need and thinking through the technology side without understanding what value those requirements would actually add to their organization.
Right.
So thinking about how you would start with defining your strategy, we really see strategy kind of fitting into two buckets. On the left, business part of your strategy is really thinking through, the what, the where, to whom you're selling, how much are you selling. So everything involving products, pricing, packaging, your market positioning, and how you'll be successful at renewing customers. That's really important. And then on the delivery side, thinking through the software delivery process end to end, what tools would be needed to do so, what roles and responsibilities are going to be needed in order to optimize delivery. So those are really the two distinct parts of your strategy that you need to consider. So transitioning to subscription business is definitely more than just pricing. A lot of times we get caught up in the fact that we're trying to generate more revenue, we're thinking about pricing, but in order to renew customers, you really need to be thinking about the self-service aspect of it and the overall service experience that your customers will have.
Yeah, I was at, I mentioned we had an event last week, and recurring revenue was one of the major discussion points. And there's a CEO of a company called Bokeh, Bohkcay. His name's Mark Siri. Anyway, he made this comment, and it really struck me to the point where I wrote it down and I had to make a slide of it because it really, I thought he really raised a strong point where he said, look, if your idea is just to offer, expirational pricing or term-based pricing, you've missed the whole point. And then you basically would just end up with another financing method for your, perpetual software. And the idea is you really need to think about transitioning to a service organization, and that provides much more value to customers throughout the life cycle, and it's not simply just buying and then paying later. Right. So I thought that point struck me, and I thought it was worth mentioning here today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so defining your strategy on the business side, we have a series of questions here, some things that you can kind of take away and think through for your organization, things that will help you starting to think about what business models will you offer, and what type of financial impact will each of them have on your organization. Oftentimes, you also need to start by thinking about which products will offer subscriptions. We see customers, they're not going to start by offering subscriptions with all their products at one time, but rather take maybe one or two and start with that and maybe transition other products then to subscription. Also thinking through your pricing strategy and how products will be packaged, maybe if you'll sell products together, bundle products, or how you'll handle that. And if you are having trouble with your strategy, third-party consulting groups can definitely assist you in that strategy development. So on the delivery side, a few questions that can help you get started here. are thinking about if your teams are ready to execute your strategy. So looking across the organization, Dave had mentioned earlier, software really touches all aspects of the organization. So speaking with those different individual groups and really understanding if they're ready to start to sell software. Then thinking about what needs the most attention in your ecosystem. So thinking about your customer journey and the tools that you need to deliver a successful journey to them, and seeing which of those parts might need attention. Also thinking about who in the organization owns software licensing and can make all of the decisions around policies, grace periods, just all the aspects of software. And then also making sure that you're communicating effectively with the executive that's driving the change. So this is a little tool that we use with customers, and we look at if their teams are ready to execute their strategy. So these are just a few of the teams that we would work with, thinking about order operations, product management, sales, your channel, IT product engineering, and so on. And after speaking with them, just kind of scoring and looking and saying, oh, these groups aren't ready, these groups are ready. And that really helps to see where you need to apply attention within the organization.
Right. And I think, it's one of the reasons we asked who the executive was that's sponsoring your transition, because when we go into companies and help them, do an assessment of if they're ready to change and so forth, oftentimes we find that product management is on the leading edge because they're ready, right? That's what they do. They change things. That's their jobs. It's awesome. But other teams are, completely lacking behind. And it's really important to, again, it's just not a pricing thing. You're really transitioning your entire business. And, you need an executive voice behind it to make sure that you've got alignment across these teams.
Good point, Dave. And the dots that you see here, these are pretty typical responses that we see with customers. So, like Dave mentioned, product management is typically green. And then you can see others that are typically red or yellow, in our opinion. So it'd be interesting for you to take that back to your organization and think through how ready they are to change. Okay. So thinking through your subscription ecosystem at your company, and then thinking through the entire life cycle from price to quote to contract to license, there's lots of tools that you can be using to deliver that experience to your customers. And you can kind of see here where Thales fits. So we fit in that 4 through 6 area in licensing, delivery, and analytics. But we certainly have a full picture of the entire life cycle and making sure that things are working end to end for your software delivery.
Cool. Now, as we mentioned before, and it's kind of getting back to the quote I brought forward from Mark Siri, when you think about your perpetual license model on the left, right, it was a one-time transaction. It's really, you're talking about ownership, and a lot of these things have changed, right? And the subscription and the usage model really involves ongoing value throughout the subscription life cycle, plus memorable experiences, getting things to your customers quickly and getting them to be able to upgrade and cross-sell and upsell and so forth on demand. And, thinking about personalized services, again, the whole ball game has really changed into being much more user-friendly and so forth. And that really should, be embraced by your entire company. And then what we do, just to give you a small sales play, we do offer tools that help companies monetize their software. And so for flexible license models, again, that's usually the core of our business. We can help you change your software behavior so that it actually aligns up with either a subscription model or a pay-per-use or trial software and so forth. And then we have an integrated back office with a really good user experience and data and reporting and things like that. But that's really not the reason that we're here today. But if you have questions on this, you can, certainly contact either Julie or me. And finally, on just really how to get started, our approach when we go into a customer, usually our customers engage us because they have a good business problem in mind, or there's certain pain points and so forth. And usually the engagement thinking is to go down the solution track, right? They want to see what we do, they want to see how we do it, they want to see how we engage, what it costs, and so forth. And our approach is to kind of not go down that path with our customers initially, and really try to focus on the business track. So that has nothing to do with the solution. And what we do is we really explore the problem. So for example, if you're going, if you want to move from perpetual licensing to subscription-based licensing, we really want you to make sure that you really understand what the impact is on your business, what the value you're going to see over 3 to 5 years is, and how we're going to measure success, right? And help you really get your hands around the problem before we show you how to solve the problem. Right, and I think that's a good message for you product managers, because product managers like to, they like answers and they like solutions, but their jobs also is to, to really understand the business side. So we really try to embrace both. And I think that wraps up the slides we have to present today. There's contact information there for me and for Julie. So please, by all means, you can send me an email. You can call me if you want. I may not pick up, but we're here to answer your questions for sure.
Well, Julie and David, thank you. I'd like to encourage everybody to submit your questions, and because we're going to start going into the Q&A section. I know we've had a few questions already in the chat window. David, here's the first question. You work with so many different types of companies across the globe. What is the number one biggest challenge in terms of transitioning that you see?
Oh, that's a good question. We do see quite a bit of variance, right? But I think the biggest thing is getting organizational alignment and an executive sponsor, and getting people's mindsets shifted. Right, that you need to become a recurring revenue type of business. You need to, your value propositions may change and so forth. And getting people to think in terms of that way will obviously get them to behave in that way. And when it's not the easiest thing to do in the world. In fact, we had a customer who's actually offering psychologists within the company to get their minds in the recurring revenue mode. I swear to God, it was great. Yeah, super, because they were convinced that was the most important thing for them, is to get people thinking in a new way.
Yep, that is fantastic. I'm going in here. We have a couple of questions that are definitions that people would like you to define. The first question is the definition of revenue leakage.
So that's the notion that your customers are using your product without paying for it, either unintentionally, which most of what we call software abuse. Most software abuse is unintentional because the software lack controls to make sure that the end user does the right thing. But it's either unintentional or intentional overuse. So we call that leakage.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and another area, just to add one other thing, another area where you could see leakage too, though, is if you don't have a solid renewal process and you're unsure of when subscriptions are renewing, then you might be losing revenue there because you weren't able to renew the subscription.
That's a big area, Julie. Both voluntary and involuntary churn is the term that people use for that, with different strategies and tactics to overcome that.
Yep.
So here's one. What is mushroom head counting?
Excuse me?
It said mushroom head counting.
Yeah, so that was one of the
that's what yours
that was one of the yeah, that was one of the pitfalls. Very good on the slide, and that's just by having a lot of manual processes, a lot of companies just throw additional headcount at the process rather than trying to fix the problem. And so over time, you're adding more and more people, and they're not necessarily adding value to the organization or focusing on your core competency.
Gotcha. Really good question. So, does this apply? I'm trying to translate a question here. So if I didn't get this correct, Anthony, just resubmit your question. If you invoice versus using credit cards, how do you deal with late missed payments? When you're moving to recurring revenue, or should they just everybody use credit cards? I don't. For B2B, sometimes it's just not an option.
Yeah, I'm far from a CFO, so I would encourage you to speak with your CFO about that question. From a technology perspective, we have technology that can allow a company to remove access to software, even if it's on-premise software, if the customer doesn't pay their invoice. And we've had some designs in play where customer payment is the trigger to actually being able to access and use the software, and that can be revoked at any time.
One other thought I had on this question too is this is a great example of a licensing policy that really needs to be defined within your organization. So thinking about the grace period, and if someone doesn't renew within a specified period of time, what happens? And so that's the value of organizing a licensing program and having someone have ownership of that.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. What's the flow? What are the business decisions? It's all tied into that. That's a really good point, Julie.
Yeah, and just speaking of licensing policies, that kind of goes back to the licensing product program manager that we spoke of before, and that one of their primary jobs is to make sure that you do define corporate standards when it comes to your software licensing.
Yep.
Right? And that makes everybody's jobs a whole lot easier when you actually have a standard that you're working towards.
I think that's a really great point. I see a number of different questions here that I would say are very specific that you could probably follow up with both Julie and David and everybody. As you can see on the slide, we have David and Julie's email and their phone number, so don't be shy. And if you want to submit a detailed question in the chat window, and the team will follow up directly with you versus us responding here in this webinar. I do have a question here, which is not too specific, that I think everybody would benefit from. At what stage do your customers usually engage with you, strategy or execution?
Oh, that's a great question. Mostly we focus on the execution side, right? So if we see a customer who's not quite ready for us, then we'll go down one path. But what my team does is really helps our customer, try to understand what state they're in if they're not even sure, and really try to assess their readiness. But most of our customers have they'll have a recurring revenue project, right? That has an executive sponsor and so forth, and then they'll look at us to, try to help them execute a piece of that. But again, if a customer is really not that ready and they haven't thought through the entire impact and so forth, there's a number of strategic consultants and third parties that we can refer you to. No problem.
Perfect. Well, we're getting to the end of our time here, and we're trying to give everybody a few minutes to catch up on everything before the top of the hour. Do you have any final recommendations for people starting out on their journey, both David and Julie?
Yeah, Julie, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I think my first recommendation would just be to really think through your strategy. And then secondly, to have the organizational support and look across the organization to make sure, you can get buy-in. Without that buy-in, it's really going to be difficult to transition your business. And so that's where my mindset would be.
Yeah.
And definitely on the execution side last. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But I think those are really great recommendations. So I'd like to thank you. I would like to thank everybody on the call today. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you sharing your time with us to learn about licensing. We will provide an on-demand replay of this session, and for all the questions that you're adding into the chat box right now, we will provide follow-up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put everybody on mute, and if you want to put a few extra questions into the chat box as we leave the chat box open for a couple of minutes, feel free to ask your questions in there, and we will get back to you. So David,
Great.
Julie, that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks for having
Take care,
us.
everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.